Greetings, my fine fellow space warriors, clad in green armor, with blue ladies, or purple ladies sometimes, depending on the game, in our heads that call us Stubmuffin. It is I, a goat. Today here I'm going to talk to you all about Halo, The Fall of Reach by Eric Nylund, which is a interesting novel that I meant to talk about months ago, but then stuff happened in my brain, and I also was like not the most enthusiastic with the book, if I'm going to be honest. Like, it's not a bad novel. I think it's a case of what I wanted to read versus what the actual book was about. As modern printings of it have this little sticker, at least mine does. I should have it up on the screen for y'all to view. Is it says Halo, little yellow sticker that says the origin story of Master Chief, and then the fall of Reach at the bottom. And that origin story of Master Chief, that is a little dot. Yeah, that's what this novel is. It's not necessarily about like the fall of Reach until basically the last, I want to say 70 pages. It's been a minute, so I might be wrong on that, but it's just the last chunk of the book is about the fall of Reach, and even then, it's not necessarily like the main focus of it. The focus of this novel is about exploring John 117, Master Chief, from the Halo games. If you haven't played or heard of them, Halo is a video game series of very fun shooty bang bang FPS games that have like kind of a party feature to them. It's the what I would describe as the Mario Party of shooters. I think that's actually, if I remember correctly, I think that's actually a thing the developers said when it came to kind of designing how they wanted the multiplayer to play, or at least kind of like the feel where it's not like a Counter-Strike or like Call of Duty, or I guess contemporarily Medal of Honor would have been the comparative thing, or Doom. It's 2001. But yeah, like kind of like a fun party style game, but in the form of a shooter. And then they made Halo 1, and that's history, and it changed literally the game forever because it was Halo. And also on that time, like Microsoft was like, hey, Halo's fucking popping. Let's get some novels going. And the company Bungie, who made Halo, was not really involved in that. And that's why we have Eric Nylund coming in and being like, oh, hey, cool, yeah, I'll write a book. He got some info, and then he wrote this. And so that's where The Fall of Reach comes from in the very broad context of the production story. If I remember correctly, I think they have a blurb at the front. It's like basically about that and how he wrote it over. I don't think he had that many months to write this novel, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the exact date, but he didn't have a whole lot of time to write it. But damn, did he fucking write good. Eric Nylund, good writer. Good writer. Prose, very, very excellente. Very excellente. Because this novel, even though I personally, I don't think I very much enjoyed it for what I was interested in, I think most people will probably enjoy the book. Because the book is about just, hey, here's why the Spartans were made. Here's the early points of Chief as he's growing into this role, as he's changing as a person, becoming a leader, and his connection to other Spartans. And then we follow through a couple of missions, and then, oh, boom, bash, we see the Fall of Reach happen in the last couple pages, and then that sets up Halo 1 at the very end of the book. That's the broad strokes of things, and it is basically that's the story. It's okay. You get explanation of why the Spartans were made, who was in charge of it, namely a woman named Dr. Catherine Halsey, who arguably I think is the most interesting character in the novel, besides maybe Captain Keyes, who they expand upon here as well, who they kind of have a whole dynamic together. And so that's basically what the novel is about. It's about expanding on the backstory of primarily the Spartans, and by extension, John 117, aka Master Chief, the Green Man, the modern day Green Murder Man. Not the classical Green Murder Man who kills demons. This one kills aliens! Multicolored aliens, to be exact. Because I think most of the demons had a very similar color palette in Doom. Very browns to reds. Yeah, browns to reds, and I think green was the primary highlight color. Yeah, I think so. If I remember, unless I'm forgetting anything. Yeah, no, I think. Oh no, the Actrotrons had gray, but that was more of a incidental thing, so I think that works out. Yeah. But yeah, so essentially, what the novel is about is just Catherine Halsey is a scientist woman who is like, okay, I'm gonna have my AIs and my various things run some things because I'm very smarty pants. And oh shit, it looks like humanity is in for a civil war coming. That can't be good. Well, I guess I better go like contact the space CIA and ask them to let me kidnap a bunch of children to turn into super soldiers. Space CIA says yes, and so the kidnapping begins. So Catherine Halsey then goes around various planets, scans a bunch of people, and be like, okay, cool, this 6-year-old's good. Clone them with a clone that will die off either very fast with mental problems that develops because it's a thing called a flash clone, where it's like really quickly grown and redundant. And then, boom, I now have my children to indoctrinate and turn into biological, technological death soldiers to fight the Civil War coming. And so that's kind of where John comes in. John is basically, after we get Halsey's broad strokes of like, get the children, John is the one that she has had the high on the most. She's the one that's like, oh, yes, this one. This is when it's special. And yeah, that it literally is as creepy as it is intended. Granted, Halsey, the novel really wants you to examine Halsey as a character, both in a sense of like it doesn't go either way of what she's doing, but you clearly the novel is intending you to make your own choices with what Halsey does, because Halsey, while initially intending it to be like, okay, me and the government are going to put down rebellions, we're going to kidnap these children and turn them into murder soldiers that like have literal indoctrination to the UNSC, the space government. Then, while she's in the process of training them, while they're like working on all these things, then First Contact happens later on in the novel, and boom, aliens show up, and they start kicking humanity's ass. I believe in the novel, when they go to retake the world where they made First Contact, which is named Harvest, it took them, I think it was like 20 ships or something against a handful of frigates from the Covenant, and I think only a handful came out of that, and then they didn't even be able to hold on to that planet much longer. Just the sheer technological difference between the Covenant and humanity is staggering, and that's kind of like one of the biggest intentions, and why Halsey's project eventually becomes kind of like a we need something to kind of push the envelope here, and that's Halsey's hope, because like it kind of, when the Covenant shows up, it throws off everything. It throws off the entire timetable for humanity's decisions. The whole rebellion thing pretty much just gets thrown out the window because, oh shit, oh god, we're all dying, and we're dying in droves. And so Halsey, and also by extension the UNSC government, eventually reveals the Spartans, both as a way of trying to boost morale, to try and say, yeah, we got these super soldiers, they're going to kick ass, and they're going to fight. And, like, they do well on the battlefield, because they're trained and made into these soldiers, but it still also has this sort of looming dread. Like, even if a Spartan, like, a victory is gained, the Covenant can just come in with their ships and stuff and glass a planet. There's a moment later on in the novel where you see Chief and his squad kind of going down on a mission on the ground to kind of just maneuver about and fight some enemies, and they kind of sort of win the ground engagement, but then the Covenant just come and burn the planet, and Chief like wants to watch his failure, or like the loss of like the planet as it gets burned away as they leave. And it very much firmly establishes the dread that I've always heard about when it came to the expanded Halo universe, especially in this first section, because the Halo games are fairly hopeful. Like, in spite of like everything's going on, Master Chief is like the best of the best, and he's gonna save us all because he's the green space Jesus we all know and love, powered by Mountain Dew. And in the novels, like, it's a bit more dreadful. Like, we see from a couple different perspectives. Like, primarily Captain Keyes, we expand upon him as a person. Like, you get to see him as a like lower end captain piloting a ship, making these desperate maneuvers to try and survive, and trying to keep basically composure and keep his crew like together before to not basically let them break under the pressure of like, oh god, we're facing an enemy that is both numerically and technologically superior than us. And so he's having to make these gambits and all these kind of things. And you see through his perspective, like kind of the dread flowing off from that, as well as like he has a very interesting relationship with Catherine Halsey in that they kind of were together for a bit and kind of not. Eventually, they do have a daughter. So I have no godly idea how, because Keyes in that first section, you could tell he is interested in Halsey, but you don't know how that relationship really would have gone. I want to say Keyes and Halsey had. Is it Miranda Keyes Halsey's daughter as well? I might be breaking or forgetting stuff. I think Halsey and Keyes did get together and they had a daughter, because I think Miranda Keyes, one of the characters from the later games, is related to that, unless I'm misremembering something. I said I read the book a while ago. More I'm talking about it in retrospect, but it does present a whole lot of really interesting like explorations of like this universe very early on, as well as like the kind of broad stroke onset of this war with the Covenant and the kind of oh god dread that comes off of like trying to fight these aliens and trying to find ways to win. And it still keeps that kind of theme in Halo where it's like a win is compounded by a large loss. Like any big win is compounded by all these other losses. Like to gain victory is to have other defeats or losses along the way. Like there's a cost to victory, essentially. In some cases, it's losing a soldier, damage to your ship, or like taking back a planet but losing so much of a fleet, or just surviving in spite of like oncoming destructive causes. And so the novel like does really well at kind of getting that sort of vibe down early on, like the ambiguity with Halsey, where you see her realize, oh yeah, we have this coming. I'm gonna make these super soldiers, and then like she's got the soldiers, they're ready to go, they're good to go. We follow John from his perspective as a kid, and how that indoctrination has shaped him, at how he has grown as a leader. Like we literally see him be like the 5-6 year old who's kind of selfish and be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go with myself and not care about anyone else, and I win. Shit, I don't get to eat dinner because I didn't help my team. Okay, now I'm gonna make my team the best of the best because I want Din Din, and so they go and they do that. And then you see him and his group of friends, like when they get dropped in the wilderness, they get together and they beat the shit out of a bunch of adults who have like stun rods and shit. And then they fly themselves home because John figured out how to do all this stuff. And he also was like, no, I'm not leaving anyone behind, even though their commanding officer said someone's going to get left behind. And then just that continues as John's growth as both as a person and as a soldier. And there's some fun with when John first gets the augments and slash gene therapy to basically make him like 8 feet tall and like super strong and shit later on down the road, where basically like he's getting this mentality of a soldier like bred into him from all these people, and then oh hey, the mission failed for other people because the augmentation processes didn't work and it fucked up a lot of people's bodies. Like what, like that kind of childish sort of mentality mixed with this soldiering thing, and him asking like his commanding officer like why he failed this mission, why he couldn't help these soldiers, and it's really good. And there's a bunch of fun stuff in there. Like there's a scene where it's ambiguous as whether or not literally like Mendoza, his trainer slash commanding officer, sent a bunch of ODSTs to where the John was like working through his anger after the surgery and like just punching the shit out of a punching bag till he broke it. And then of these ODSTs, basically these orbital drop shock troopers, or hell jumpers is what they're called, are like the best of non-augmented humans. And then John basically kills one of these dudes through a punch where I think he just shatters his entire skull or something just from the sheer like this is without the armor. Like he's just a kid in his like sweatpants shorts or whatever you would call like boxing shorts if you were like doing shit at a boxing gym. And then he just breaks this dude's face and then beats the shit out of his other two buddies. And then they gets broken up. And then it's a really really well written novel. I just really wish it had more about the actual fall of Reach. I think that's mainly my big thing is I was expecting a lot more on the fall of Reach because Reach is one of my favorite video games. Is Halo Reach is the prequel game that they wrote about, and also has a whole thing where the game and the novel are kind of dissected in that the novel was written without Bungie's approval, the developer, and just inserted into their timeline because of that. Then they wanted to go back and kind of their final game before they left to go make Destiny and that whole situation. They made Halo Reach, which was the prequel game where you play as a like Spartan named Noble Six and that his squad, and you follow them throughout the fall of Reach and how there's time inconsistency, certain actions of characters, and like where they are and everything. And it has that whole problem of developer intent versus broad scale, like the people who own the IP expanding it kind of situation. I believe like the current editions of the story try to mitigate those by doing certain things. But basically, what ends up happening is Chief and them. I think they just go and fight on like a space station to help some people and blow up a ship. Or no, I think that's early in the novel. And then I think they blow up the ship on there, and then one of the characters gets injured, another one has to go off, and so I think it's Linda that gets put in cryostasis, and it's basically player two if you play Halo 2 player. I think it's the meme or something I remember seeing Saw said. But yeah, so that is basically what ends up happening, and then they can't go down to the planet. Keyes is like, we're jumping out. Cortana, bump us. And Chief is left to like watch as the world where basically all his world that he basically called home effectively burns, and that's kind of like the somber ending moment. And I was more expecting like, oh, we'd see kind of like the latter half of the novel is Chief up in space trying to fight, trying to do the best of the best, and then maybe a couple characters down below, but we only get like a small handful of moments of seeing what's happening on Reach, and kind of like what's going down there, like the actual fall, and then boom, it's over. But like the actual fall part is just so small and minimal. It's just kind of like, oh dang, I wanted more of that because I wanted to kind of get into that feel because I love Reach. I love that game's somber story where you are constantly like scraping together hope, constantly trying to do your best the best, and it failing hard, and you trying to carry on hope till you are literally given the torch of hope, figuratively, until you have to give it away. You have to give away hope, and then you are left on Reach to basically perish. And after, well, no, you're not perishing. The last moment of the game is the famous survive, miss an objective thing, where you are told you have to survive until you die. And that's kind of like the last gasp of hope is, oh, okay, no, if I don't have the hope of surviving, like, or the hope is you survive as long as you can and take out as many people while you kind of wander around this waste and find slowly like other Spartans around. And it's really good ending. There's a reason a lot of people really like the ending of Reach a whole lot. But yeah, like I know my initial feelings when I read this book were not that great. Like not in the sense of it's a bad book and I didn't like it, but it's a very good book that I don't think I have an interest in reading again, or at least not for a very long time, because it was not really what I was interested on. Because I was like, oh, I knew about the origins of the Spartan program. I knew about Halsey being a monster. You can tell how I felt about Halsey, since the novel is more like, hey, you make your own choice. But yeah, no, Halsey's fucking monster. She fucking was like, oh yeah, hey, civilian uprising? No, we're not going to just tell the government and try to make like a thing where we mediate these people. No, I'm just gonna kidnap a bunch of children and turn them into death soldiers. I'm gonna have my own personal death squad. Woo! Rock and roll, I'm Dr. Halsey. I'm a fucking insane monster woman who is now a monster mama, because that's kind of like how I would see Halsey, especially in how they later categorize her, where she is the I would describe her a mother of monsters, but the monsters are actually good, I guess, or like I don't know. You get what I mean. Like she is a bad person who basically gave birth to a bunch of good things, but that still doesn't make it right for all the bad things she done. Because John is basically like her favorite son, in every context. Like whenever he is brought up, especially in the novel, like the later half, where Cortana, the blue lady who calls her a stud in his head, is basically like, I want to have my own Spartan. And so Halsey's like, oh, you choose anyone you want. And she chose her favorite, and like is like, no, that's my favorite though. And then she has to like prove a lie, and it's a fun back and forth. Halsey is probably like, anytime she is being the primary character we're exploring, I very much enjoy that, because that's the fun of like seeing this person who is morally dubious make these decisions, who, in spite of their choices, is doing a thing to help humanity, but you also like can't help but like be kind of like at her because of like what she actually is doing, but not like to like an insane degree. It's just still like that kind of creepy, like weird but interesting kind of way that you can do in science fiction. But yeah, I definitely like. I think my opinion has shifted more over to be like, it's fine. But like I probably, like I said, I probably won't read it again for a while. But I do respect all it did and why people say this is like really good. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. It's just not really like what I was interested on in terms of expanding to the Halo universe and like what that setting has to offer. I have actually started reading the next novel, which is a proper novelization of Halo 1. And that is written in a much more different style. Like Eric Nowlin, I know, had a very little time to write this novel comparatively to like say like a standard novel or something that you would have like a bunch of time for. Things like a chunk of months instead of like a year or something. And then apparently The Flood, the novel that adapts Halo 1 story, was written, I think, 10 months or 10 weeks or something. I forget what I heard. And that it kind of like has this sort of more rough around the edges, but it's still interesting in that like you see what the game, you know, like if you played the game, like you know where each moment is, but then it expands upon it, and it's interesting. But man, would I love the prose of that, like of this book of Fall of Reach in that novel a bit, because the prose writing here is very good. Like Nyland knows how to characterize and like speak very well with his words to like both an ambiguity of mood, of dread, and also like of action. Like you can very well like follow what is being told, what is being said here, and like how everything flows, as well as like a description of the various creatures and like things we see. It's all very well written, I do say. Yes. Don't necessarily talk too much about prose, but yes, this is very good prose right here. Yes. But yeah, so that is basically my thoughts on Halo, The Fall of Reach. I'm going to be continuing to read The Flood, so hopefully I'll get that up there soon. I am very curious to see my opinion on that after I finish it, because that is what people call the worst Halo novel, apparently. Or at least of the initial 4 books, to my knowledge. Because yeah, that is the one people say is the worst, and I'm like, oh, this is fine. It's very like very differently wrote, and like I said, not as like kind of not as concrete. I think that'd be the word for it. Not as concrete. It's more kind of flowy. It is the definition of kind of like a schlocky action book, but not like a bad way so far. I'm about 70 pages in. I think I'm on like chapter 3 or something. I think that's where I'm at. Like the best parts are all the stuff where it expands on like just random characters. Like there's a bit where you meet Fohammer, and what she was doing on the Pillar of Autumn before it crashed, and then you see like just the guy who woke up Chief and just gets shot fucking in the control room when you're like making your way after you start the game up. You get a little bit about that guy, and it kind of that is the more interesting aspects of it, of like just seeing the people around Master Chief as all this stuff happens, and then when you get to Chief, it's just kind of like Chief did a barrel roll and he kicked this guy in the face, and then he shot him with his multi-burst assault rifle, and it kind of gets repetitive, at least so far. Hopefully, it'll change it, but I think that's probably going to be why most of the stuff is because it feels like them are trying to adapt the segments of like the actual game is where it's going to get straddled a bit. At least that's my early impressions upon reading about 70 or so pages into a 300 and some page book. I want to say. I think that's what it is. But yeah, so that is my thoughts on the all that and my also early impressions of the Flood. But yeah, I hope this was interesting. I don't know if I actually am gonna splice in any gameplay footage into this, but hey, I hope you enjoyed just watching or listening to me ramble on about a book as always. But yeah, hope you'll have a good one. I will see y'all in the next one.